Hi, this is Glenn Eldridge with West Valley College Chemistry, and I'm making this video to introduce you a little bit to the LabQuest 2 sensor and interface, and where we'll be collecting data in a lot of experiments this year in general chemistry. So here it is, it's the LabQuest 2. It's basically a computer for collecting data and manipulating data, and you can plug a lot of sensors in to it to collect that data. You could also just use it as a way to make a graph. We'll go over that in a little bit. You should find these in the charging station somewhere in the lab, which is where they should go at the very end too. So you pull it out. A lot of times just unplugging it will turn it on, but if you don't see it there, up on the top left corner there's a little power switch, and it should power on. A little bit about the things that you could press. That power on button, it could actually be a real lifesaver at some point in the semester if the LabQuest 2 sort of shuts down and doesn't seem like it's working. First, well, if it shuts down, it might have run out of power, and so you might need to get a little power adapter with a cord, and it'll plug in over here, and that way you can use it while it's charging. But if the screen locks up and there's no way to get out of it, nothing's working, and it's not going to come back, the power button, it has two different ways of turning it off. You could just do a quick power off, but then it also has a hard power off, what I call a hard power off, where you hold it for a solid 10 seconds and it reboots it, and it's almost like it's coming back fresh, brand new out of the box. And 99% of the time that I've had a problem over the last year, that ended up helping out a lot. So you got the power switch. Along the left, we got some things that we can plug in sensors. You got a USB sensor. Some of our sensors are USB. And we got these 3 different channel slots. So you could have as many as, just on this side, 4 different sensors. 3 channel slots, 1 USB. On the bottom, there's nothing that we will use. On the top, there are other places that you could plug things in, like a microphone or a camera. We don't really use those this semester in general chemistry. On the right side, you've got another way to collect data on the right through a USB. You have the power connector at the bottom. This is what will go into the charging station at the end. It's very important that when you're putting it back in the charging station that it's facing the right way, the way that it was facing directly, and that this is down. And then it's got that, like I've already mentioned, that other power plug right here. Also on this side, you'll find a stylus tied in with this little string. So a stylus, this is helpful for maneuvering around on these. They can be kind of small screens. And then on the back, if you really hard press, something doesn't seem like it's working at all, you could always pop open the back like this, and then pull the battery pack out, wait 10 seconds or so, plug it back in, restart it that way, and it'll be a fresh, brand new LabQuest 2. And then it's got some little stands that you can put back here so that you can set it up on your bench with a little bit of an angle to get rid of that glare, so you don't have to constantly hold it. So that's the physical, those are the physical buttons on the LabQuest 2. Now, as you're working with it, again, when you power it on, you'll see this screen right here. As soon as you plug a sensor in, usually it pops up here right in the very middle, and it tells you what it is. If it's a pH meter or spectrophotometer or any of the other sensors, we have a thermometer. That's one of the nice things about it, is it immediately knows what's been connected and it's ready to start collecting data. But here on the first page, we see 5 different tabs, and the top little bar changes a little bit depending on what tab you're in. So right now this is the meter page. It shows you what's connected and how it's ready to collect data. Then the next tab over is the raw data. Here's some data that I just made up some data and put it in here. So that's the graph page. You'll spend a lot of time on the graph page, and we'll come back and talk a lot about all these different buttons here. Then you have the XY page, where this is what the raw data looks like, the pure numbers, individual numbers, X and Y, and multiple different runs. You basically will cycle back and forth between those first 3 tabs, the meter, the graph, and the XY. But there are 2 more tabs. There are the instructions, which we haven't really uploaded any instructions to your LabQuest viewer, your LabQuest, so most likely these are empty. And then finally, the notes page. At least for the first year, we didn't have students going back into that same LabQuest week after week and looking at data. And so it's very unlikely that you will write any notes down here. Most of your notes will probably go in your lab notebook. But again, if you're going to maybe save the data, come back to it, you want to know what one run is versus another, you want to do it all in one place, then maybe you can start using this note page and you can save it. That's what it's designed for. Again, not too many people use it that way. So now we'll go back through these first 3 tabs and talk about some of the the specific buttons that are going to come in most handy that you'll use maybe every single week that you use the LabQuest to collect data. Again, back on the meter page, pop in, it'll tell you which could be, again, multiple sensors have been connected. And this mode right here, if you click on it on the screen with the stylus or your finger, you can go through a bunch of different modes, how you're going to collect data. Most of the ones that you're going to use this semester are time-based. You're doing an experiment over 10 minutes and you want to collect all that data, or events with entry. Those are basically the 2 different modes you're going to use this semester. Depending on which mode you pick, you could change the rate and the interval. Those 2 are related. As I change rate, samples per second. So if you want to do 1 sample per second, just switch it in half. That means that there's going to be 1 sample, or 1 second goes for every sample. So that this one went down by 2. This one, the interval went up by 2. And then you could tell it how long you want to collect data. Right now it's only going to collect for 10 seconds. So maybe you want to switch that to 120 seconds. So you're going to collect 2 minutes worth of data, plus the very first one. I can't imagine that we're going to end up changing any of these other things. So you pretty much will switch back and forth between time-based and events with entry. Maybe, nah. I'll probably leave the events with entry till later, I guess. So that's basically it on the meter page. I like to do most of my work in this graph page where you'll see the data pop in as you're going. So on this graph page, before you collect any data, it would be completely blank. And up here you'd see which run you're on. It would say run 1. And it would tell you what the instantaneous information the sensor's reading right now is. But it's not going to store any of that until you press the play button. As soon as you start that play button, you're going to start collecting data, temperature data, pH data. And so you see what the data looks like once you on the graph once you hit play. If you were to do an events with entry experiment, as soon as you hit play, a second button pops up right here, and it says keep. And you use that button every time you want to keep a data point, because with events with entry, you're not going to take a data point every single second. You're only going to save a data point when you're ready to, because maybe the pH meter is hovering in air and you don't want to save all that data because it's not measuring pH. You wait till it's in the solution and then you hit keep, and then it puts it on the graph, stores it in the XY, and you see how the graph changes over time every time you hit the keep button. So as soon as you hit play, keep comes up, and then you would just use keep over and over and over again to collect all the different data that you want to collect for that experiment. And once you're done collecting data, then you would hit stop. As soon as you hit play, the play switches to stop. If you hit stop, it sort of thinks that that experiment is over. One of the most likely errors, I guess you would call it, with using LabQuest is hitting stop too early. It's not really the end of the world. There's a lot of different ways to fix that or work around it. You could always just do a new trial, file a new trial, or in certain very specific scenarios, you could append data. You'll have to find that up here in the graphs, especially over an XY. I'm not going to show that specifically because some of us may not ever even need that situation, but you should know that it is an option. But it's also really easy to just collect a new one. So let's say I hit play, I collected my data, and then I've hit stop. LabQuest thinks that's one new experiment. I could then hit this file cabinet up here. So if I click that file cabinet, it will then store that data as trial 1, and it'll pop over to trial 2. And again, it would normally be blank. I put some new data in here so we could look at it in a minute. And now you're ready to hit play, stop, play, or in the events with entry, play, keep, then stop. And then you're ready. That's collecting data. And again, you could always come back to XY and see what that data looks like as it's being collected. See the raw data. So now I've collected my data and I need to get some information off of this graph. There's a bunch of different things we could do. We could use this button here to switch back and forth between runs, or this is really cool, we could click all runs, and that way we can compare the two runs together on the same graph. And LabQuest is taking care of a lot of the scaling, making sure the data all fits in one graph, but it's not there's not a lot of white space, so it's a lot easier to compare. You may, especially during titrations, need a specific data point value. So you can click anywhere on the screen. It's going to try to find that specific data point that's closest to where you've clicked. Again, since I made up this data, there's only 5 data points along the x-axis for each, the blue and the red curve. So it's going to find one of those. And it's telling me what the values are on that line. See this black line here? That's where it's reading the data. At x equals 9, the red one is 27 and the blue one is 47. I could use the stylus and I could click these over here. These little buttons are really useful because they move to the very next data point. So I click it and it switches over to one data point. A lot of times you have a lot of data really close to each other and you want to know what those specific values are, and so you could use these to click between one data point at a time. So right now I'm over here on the second to last data point, x15. These are the new y values. Now that I've got one runs of data up here, I'm looking at it. A lot of times you're going to need to analyze the data, put a curve fit on it maybe. So under every single one of the tabs has a different set of pull down menus for it. The file one is always the same, and this is a very familiar pull down menu. New, open, save. New this semester, we're going to have the option of printing your graphs. It's going to be pretty important for us that we're not printing too early. A lot of times when we've had printers in classes before, we see a lot of students getting very anxious to print that button and then realize they've left something off. Maybe they wanted both runs on there. Maybe they wanted to change it from X and Y to some actual values. Maybe they want the curve fit on there too. So really this semester, try to triple check and make sure your graph is ready to print and ready to go in your notebook. It's very finalized. Maybe get a second set of eyes on it, your lab partner, somebody near you, your lab instructor, before you print it. So that's all from the file. From the graph, there's a few things here that you might use. You might strike through data. That's no good. Maybe there's a data point that, again, the pH meter wasn't in solution, but you accidentally kept that data point. You could strike through the data, and that's going to remove it from the graph and remove it from the curve fit. Or maybe you strike through one data point, but you realize you want to keep it back, you could restore that data point. Those are the two main ones that I use here. Analyze is very interesting. There's a lot of stuff here. Most of the time, we're going to go straight to curve fit. So I'm showing you this because you'll use it, I think, multiple times this semester. Analyze, curve fit. Click on that. You pick which data you want. In this case, I've only got one graph. I've only got Y. So I'll click on that. Then I come over to this page, and it's telling me what kind of equation I want. A lot of times we'll do a linear data. See how linear our data is. So we'll click on linear, and then immediately it tells me what my equation of the line is. So this is because this isn't a very linear data, right? It's up and then down. It's actually a lot better Gaussian data. And so there's the values for that equation, including some of other information. So it fits a curve better than it fits a line. But again, if it were a line, those are the values. And it's also telling me my correlation. Remember, correlation is similar to R squared. The closer it is to 1, the better. 0.99, great. 0.95, that's okay. Not the best. Less than 0.95, you may have made a pretty serious error somewhere along the lines. So I could put my curve fit on there, and now I'm applying the curve fit, and now it will show up on the graph page, and now it will also print with that graph page. And again, I could go and I could hit the file cabinet and get even a third trial. Or say I'm done with this type of experiment, I want to collect new and different data completely separate, where I don't want to have to overlap them, or I don't need the option to overlap them, I guess I should say. I can go back to File New. So I think that's a pretty good quick rundown of LabQuest 2 and the buttons you should feel comfortable clicking. I'd like to tell everybody that there's no self-destruct button on the LabQuest 2. Another one that pops up every now and then is the home button. While it's on, and say the stylus isn't finding the buttons the way you're clicking it, sometimes the screen gets uncalibrated. I'm not sure how that happens, but if you press that home button for a couple seconds, it pops up with a screen calibration where it asks you to press the stylus to the corners and then to the middle, and now it's calibrated, and usually the stylus works a little bit better. So we talked a little bit about LabQuest 2 itself, the power button, the connections, the stylus, how to charge it. We talked about just now calibrating the home screen. On the meter page, the file menu page is the same for all. If you ever need new, there it is. As soon as you hit new, it asks you if you want to get rid of that old data. So either you got to save that old data if you want to revisit it, print it off if you want it, or it's going to be gone. So be careful with new. Don't just lose all your data that you just collected. If I had a sensor in here, I could go to calibrate, and that's going to calibrate the sensor. There's only a couple sensors this semester where we'll go through the calibration procedure, but there it is. Some of our sensors are wireless. You'll have the option to do wireless, and that's kind of cool because the LabQuest doesn't have to be there within 3 feet of the sensor. And that's actually pretty fast most of the time too. So don't shy away from wireless. It's kind of cool to be able to collect data from across the room. And then again, modes, switching between time-based and events with entry. Over on the graph page, this is where you're going to see the data that you've collected. Again, this is where you spend most of your time. If you're having an issue with either data or sample collection, this is probably what you're going to want to show your instructor. This is where the conversations sort of start. See how far along you are. Again, under Analyze, Curve Fit. That's where you're going to be able to apply a line. And file box to get a new run. You could click on this button to cycle between runs or show all of them. Down here you've got the start button, which would turn to a stop button. And if it was a events with entry experiment, as soon as you hit play, a keep button pops up right here. It would be really nice if that keep button was somewhere far away so that you didn't accidentally hit stop. But you got to be really careful not to hit stop on an events with entry experiment. Then on the XY page, this is again a place where you go to see what the raw data, what the numbers look like. On some of the experiments, you're going to be asked to go find a derivative, and that's where you do that experiment, you do that calculation on this one, where you go new calculated column, and then select equation type, and you got to scroll way down near the bottom. There's first and second derivative over here. So there's first derivative, yx. Usually you leave those alone, and then you hit OK. And then on the yx bob, the xy page, it's got the derivative calculated between the different data points. And then back on the graph page, in blue now, it's showing what the derivative looks like. Again, this is data that I just made up. It wasn't really supposed to have an interesting derivative. First derivative, but that's what the data looks like. On some of your titrations, you'll be asked to calculate first derivative. It's a little bit easier to see the endpoint, especially if you collected a lot of good data in the middle near the endpoint, if you look at the derivative. We talked about striking through data, especially again on the XY, where I could click a data point. Let me click maybe this top one on the blue. And I could go table, strike through data. Some little red lines pop up on that one. Then I go back over here, go to run 2. Now, get rid of that derivative. Now, because I strike through that data, there's nothing in the middle. So the data is starting to look really weird. It's just up to 3, flat, back down. And I could go back, re-click on that data point, restore the data, then come back to my graph page, and there, that data point has been put back in, and I get my little Gaussian curve again. I guess that's it. Yeah, and then the last 2 tabs you're not going to use too much. There's a lot of different things that you could do with LabQuest 2. There's a lot of experiments that this company, Vernier, is doing with biology and physics. So you might use them at school you transfer to or over in biology in the near future. The most important thing, I think, is that these sensors, the way that we're collecting this data is pretty universal. pH meters, thermometers, UV vis spectrophotometers. These are the pieces of equipment that scientists use every day. And this interface, this LabQuest 2, allows us to collect that data. It's a cheap way because you got one computer and 10 different sensors that can go into it at any one time. So you can buy the sensors that you need, and you buy LabQuest 2, and you collect the data that way. You should know that you could actually collect this data on your phone. Vernier has a couple free apps that anybody could download. They work, from my experience, they work really good with Apple products, and they don't work at all with anything else, which is unfortunate, which is why we have the LabQuest 2 in the labs. But there is an app that you can connect the wireless sensors to, collect the data straight onto your phone, and start analyzing the graphs in those ways. If you want to do get really fancy and starting to do your experiment that way. So anyway, I hope that you're feeling a lot more comfortable with LabQuest 2. I hope you are able to work through some of the issues. Remember that 10-second power off is going to reboot it, and 99% of the time it comes back fresh and ready to use as a brand new one. Calibrating that screen for 10 seconds, and maybe if the screen goes black and it doesn't come back on, maybe again it just needs some power. So you can ask either stockroom or your lab instructor for an individual little power cord so that you can provide power while you're working with it. A lot of times there's an extra LabQuest hanging around the room, so you could probably just hand this off to your instructor and say, oh, this one's not working for one reason or another, but I'm going to grab this other LabQuest just to get started with the experiment. And so that way you're not spending half hour trying to troubleshoot for us. Hope you learn the things that you need to learn this semester. Hope it provides more benefits than interferences towards learning this semester. Thanks.